Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 1109. This is going to be a short of potpourri or summary of what happened during the summer here. It's been in the vicinity of 8 to 9 weeks, I think, might even be 10. And a lot of things has happened without a doubt. I've been pressing forward, and maybe especially those lectures that were in the heat seem to have cooked my head and made it possible to go into new thinking, Heraclitus, to take a site from George H Kahn. If you're used to the normal thinking, understanding Heraclitus could be shut off. So I've been thinking, by pressing my body a bit, pressing my thinking, it will be possible to enter this very, very different way of thinking. And I term name the lecture How Knowledge Can Be Gained from or through the integrity of body/mind. This is the complementarity of body-mind. This is not to say that they are the same, or not even, I would say, this is something I remember from Rodolphe Gasché, and it's that two things are not the same, means they act to implement each other, make things stronger. Whereas if they are the same, strength will not be gained. So maybe the old saying that it is two sides of the same coin could be misleading. Complementarity is not two sides of a coin, because that implies that the coin can be touched, can be seen, can be felt, can be used. So there are some problems. Maybe you can heighten that a little bit more, so okay, more in the level of my eyes. Take the lowest down. I'll show you. Not a problem. Let's just take here. It's taller. Yes. We got a new thing. We got a new thing going on here. The old help gave up only 4 lectures ago. So in the end I have to use some sort of support. But now we have a new one, and it sounds, I don't know if it's going to affect the sound quality, I hope not. But in that case I apologize in advance. We can say this is the first tryout with a new tripod. The integrity of the body-mind, and as I mentioned, is not two sides of the same coin. This integrity, or this complementarity, is the cause of all sensation, understanding, thinking, development, gain of stance. I'll get back to what gain of stance is. So I got this idea, clearer exponder, from August John Appleton. He speaks about 2 areas of the body/mind, one dorsal and then one ventral. And it's not so much the existence of the ventral or the dorsal as the opposition, what lies in between. And that could usually be pointed to be the area that goes between the area where you can get tickled, which is the ventral, and the area that is dorsal, that doesn't tickle that easy. And this is actually the very place for movement in all animal. It can be most clearly seen in the stingray. You can see that it flies, and I was astounded when I finally realized I think I looked at the stingray I've been looking at them for ages. I know that David Attenborough had a period when he was absolutely fascinated by them. But he didn't mention, I didn't see in those very nice programs that he produced, that they were not using the fins for moving. And I realized they are using the dorsal ventral seam, the contradictions. And without these things being opposing, there will be no movement. And the movement does not come only from inside the body. It comes as much from the outside of the body, on the very edge. So my former thinking was that there are, like, fish is a better example so you can understand. Take a fish, and I thought the fins, so to speak, moved the solid body in the same manner exactly as a motorboat, where you attach a motor, where the body of the boat doesn't do anything, might be steering, but don't do anything to the actual locomotion. This is how I thought about fishes, and I thought so about stingrays as well. But now I realize more and more it is the opposition that makes the movement. And without an opposition, with clinging to one part too much, there will be no movement. This will help to understand Heraclitus. This will make you understand what is complementarity. Complementarity is not 1 + 1 = 2. Of course, it's not 1 - 1 = 0. Complementarity is something very, very different. And our normal way of thinking and our normal body stance makes it impossible for us at the beginning to understand it. And this is one of the reasons Heraclitus hides the message. He is not clear. There is a reason for his unclarity. Something that, for instance, Aristotle never understood. He liked him, but he never understood that the unclarity is not a defect, it's the message. It's an important part of the message. And without that, or even worse, with the clarification, which is actually what most of the interpreters of Heraclitus does, they try to clarify his thinking and thereby nullify it, to use a term from Rodolphe Gasché. It is only when they are true oppositions or oppositions in some way that the thinking, the acting, the development, knowledge can be had. This is similar, but not exactly the same as thea aletheia, thinking of the diverging, converging lines between the two things. This is where everything happens. It could be called a process, but actually it's what is before process and stillness. It encompasses both what is still and what is moving. That was not my understanding before. I gained a lot here, and this happened this summer. I'm really thankful for the tip from Kalle, I said that before. But Charles H Kahn set me right there. I was in the impression, especially tricked by one popular interpreter here in Sweden called Bet Yoga Yogson, that Heraclitus was some sort of maverick, lunatic. That's maybe in some way partly true, but it's not the whole truth. He is a grand philosopher. Or to cite my friend Jan Eiskens, there is only one, and that is Heraclitus. Everything after that is philosophaitis or philosophitis, implying that there is some sort of disease. Well, there is kind of a disease. In this hyperbole lies the truth, because we are to be ever jumping between dorsal, ventral, existence, non-existence, truth, untruth, and when we try to caress one, we lose the other one, and you will see the thing you are caressing will turn into dust. It is like holding a statue made of gesso, very hard. It's very fragile. Press it too hard and it turns into dust. And the emotion could be, I really love this statue made of gesso, I'm going to caress it. It will disappear. Neither will you have the statue, nor will you have what is not the statue. Sticking to the static, the stillness, existence like Parmenides, will mean that he loses flexibility, movement, but also, and this is the important part, he will also lose permanence, staticness and stillness. That is the message of Heraclitus. It's a bit tricky, to say the least. Another way of explaining this, because this needs definitely different takes, you could see that making some sort of contradiction preemptively, doing it too fast, too early, out of place, maybe from a place that is transcendental, outside of yourself. I liken this to, you go to see a house, you see a grand house, and you too quickly want to describe the color, either for yourself or for someone else, and you say, that's white. In the swiftness, and this is very important, Heraclitus mentioned that, is also mentioned from some other philosophers like Wittgenstein, in the very swiftness, it is like a chop of the saber. You take away all alternatives. It's too quick to be reality. It is rather something much easier. It's the exclusion of the rest. So therefore, white here will be defined by non-white. And the house will become more distant, especially the color of the house. This is distancing in space. This is not being in the rhythm. It's cutting off too short. Like if somebody wants to say something and you by mistake cut that person off. It happens to me all the time. So the message got lost. It has this sense of being automatized, not voluntarily. This happens too quick to involve a high portion of your personal will. You will block out, by going to white too early, all the other colors, but you will also block out the different varieties of white. I take a look-see, I was shocked how many whites there are. Something called pearl white, California white, emerald white, shell white, calcite white, you name it. And by saying pearl white, for instance, you will be closer to the thing. Pearl white. All other whites. All other whites will be excluded. So you see here, it's a bit like a funnel. It gets narrower. And this is what I call focal setting. It has to fit the situation. Situation, you should remember that, because situation is something that is founded by quantum physics. Situation is the most important. Thereafter comes time. It needs to fit the situation. I call that focal setting, is my term. Focal setting is that you have to find the exact level. And I compare this to a funnel. It happens to be narrow at the base. Doesn't have to be that way, but it's just a way of conveying what I'm trying to say. Lack of understanding, so to speak, or less understanding of focal setting or the situation could lead to that you make yourself like an automatic saber, like a machine that sabers everything that comes in. There are many problems with that automatic saber. It doesn't have distinction, it doesn't have accuracy, it does it most probably, and this is also interesting, time is also an ingredient, and that it will do it, for instance, every 5 seconds. Chop, chop. So imagine you're working in a sausage factory, and for some reason the sausages started to come uneven. Now the saber or the cutter will cut them at the middle or at the end. It will not be exact. This can give you the impression that you need exactness, some sort of exactness, and that's focal setting, and this is why we changed space and time to situation in quantum mechanics. And we are going to find parallels in all these. Heraclitus, Francis Igor, Michel Bitbol, Iain McGilchrist, George H Kahn, of course, Heraclitus, Ludwig Wittgenstein, Rodolphe Gasché. Big help from Rodolphe Gasché for me to understand this. And he calls a preemptive chopping with the saber nullification. Yes, his metaphor is the mirror, and it's to swiftly look in the mirror and decide that this shirt is brown or something. This is not completely true. For some circumstances it will make a difference. Maybe at dusk it will still look brown. So it's a two thing. You lose, or we lose together, the distinction, the accuracy, but it's also another factor, a second factor, and that is that this very tendency establishing indirectly in the whole body mind system the world at large, or the perspective from nowhere, by having the machine automatic, and in the end you will do the splitting so quick you can't even notice it, and thereby you will have the experience of being an illusionary experience, yes, but you still will have some sort of experience that the world is outside from you, and also outside from the one listening to me here, Kalle, and also the audience and all people of Sweden, Europe, the world. That outsideness is this chopping out, automatic, without distinction, without knowing you can change the focal setting. How do you get to learn the focal setting? Well, by changing. This is the work of Jacques Derrida, of course. I didn't write Jacques Derrida, but Rodolphe Gasché was the one who showed me that particular exacting tendency in Jacques Derrida, making the text clearer, helping the author and helping the reader, both at the same time. I think that was, until Rodolphe Gasché, for me, almost excluded. Something of an impossibility. And I think the majority of the people who read Derrida, and for all God's sake Heidegger to a certain extent, think they are actually criticizing the author. No, not at all. It is helpful. It's a way of helping. So in this, and this is one of the revelations or epiphany, maybe it's a better word. I did shout Eureka somewhere there in the south. And that's understanding that there is a body-mind position to the world at large, a position from nowhere, the transcendental signifier, you name it. I'm not going to mention all the denominations that we have been using. So, the stuckness of the focal setting, think of a camera that you haven't used the zoom for a long while and you left it out in the rain. Oh no, what happened? It rusted. And not only did it rusted, so you cannot change the zoom or the focal setting, somehow you forgot you could do it. Maybe the years go past and you forgot that you had that ability. Because it's a personal ability as well. My not knowing that you can change the focal setting, it will not have an effect on the world. The world still needs focal setting. We still do it. It's just that my focal setting is stuck. Not necessarily the rest of the world. So, for one, you can call that fixed focal setting is the same as a world at large or a point from nowhere, and an experience. It needs to be an experience. It needs to be, to some extent, embodied. And that is the implicit, probably non-verbal feeling that the focal setting cannot be changed. For some people it's truer than more, and others. For me it was very, very helpful to have a conversation with a person who was incredibly bodily, experientially convinced that it couldn't be changed. That helped me to understand that it can be changed. If someone is more extreme than yourself, that could actually be very helpful. I would say it's necessary. Second, there is a stiffness of the body. Because once we start thinking that contradictions are two sides of the same coin, it will also affect the different areas of the body, the two distincting areas of the body, and we're going to get stuck with only one. And I'd say usually I'm stuck with the ventral. That's the one that's existing, the other one is not so necessary. You could call that reification of one side of the complementarity. An exaggeration and an hyperbole would be to say that classical physics sort of exempted everything except for existence or particle. But it's true to some way. I think it's still helpful to say that. What did we discover with quantum mechanics was the wave of potentiality. And that those two things are actually complementary. And it could be this, if I don't, at the same level I don't understand complementary, I think it's two sides of the very same coin. Sort of a coin I can see from a point of nowhere, outside myself, or somebody could see that point. All those things are wrong. And those are the tendencies that makes it more harder to be free in your body. Because if you have a general tendency not accepting contradiction in that way, making them complementary, at the very same time you allow them to be completely contradictory. Because two sides of the same coin being the same, it doesn't really allow for contradiction to be total. It has many faults, that metaphor. For instance, the sides are the same material, they're stuck together. I used to make do with two sides of the same coin, and now I see how ineffective it is. it has to do with timing. What do I mean by timing? Yeah, it's being too quick to make the contradiction. And timing has a connection with free will. Because if it's happened too quickly without my will, yes, there is another person lurking about here. Who could that be?
Regarding what?
The too quick action of a person to decide something. Without the inflection.
Limit?
Yeah, yes. Libbet, you mean?
Libbet.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Ben Libbet showed that we don't make conscious decisions anymore. This is too quick tendency. It leads to an experience of determinism because it's true for you. And since you disregard you or the subject in the gestalt of a picture from nowhere or a viewpoint from nowhere, you get this catch-22. The third thing could be a more emotional or sensitive take, that it would be a tendency, general tendency. No, I'm not being that specific, but it would be that your knowledge will be less from yourself, less endogenous and more exogenous. It becomes less true to the fact. And here we must remember the Klein bottle. So Rappaport is going to be included in this. The Klein bottle shows that to both understand the objective and the subjective needs to be in on it. And therefore all knowledge must come from the inside. And that knowledge will also be the knowledge from the outside. It's a very odd thing. Defies logic. It is not in the books of our friend Sture, I can tell you directly. I don't mean to be mean, I just try to exemplify here. It is very important to understand that space itself has that structure. And I think that's pretty convincing. For me, it was good to use the Klein bottle sometimes when I figure about these things. Sometimes I just sit at night, have a lit candle, I just look at it and I sit, think, having a cup of tea or something, relaxing before I go to bed. And if you start looking for something exogenous as knowledge or source of knowledge, it will actually, oddly enough, be derived from something that is more originary. The thing that is either before the complementarity or is the complementarity, it is definitely the superposition, and therefrom stem both existence and movement. Pandai nai, everything is one. But I had the misunderstanding before with the second famous expression from Heraclitus, which is pandarei, all is flux.
Yes. All is floating or something like that, yes.
And I think it was so popular to interpret it in that way because it felt like a bit anarchistic, it felt like give up the world, it's a little bit of Camus, it's a bit of Jean-Paul Sartre, it's like smoking 60 cigarettes a day and not really caring about anything. I think that is one reason for the popularization of Heraclitus in the 60s. I actually found a wave for Heraclitus in the 60s with New Age, with hippie. But this is not true to the fact. This is not, it's very far from what Heraclitus meant. For one thing, you just move from one side of the contradiction to the other one and say only one side is true. Thereby you have done nothing. Nothing at all. It's a nullification. It is saying too early something is white when you should look into it because it's important in that specific situation. If it were not important, you don't have to do it. Do you see what I'm mentioning here? Well, you can see somewhere slowly free will is coming into the picture, where you decide how to do. Now it's the return of the subject, so to speak, but it was never gone. That's also important. We can talk about the return of the subject and still understand it was never gone. Why wasn't it gone? Well, it was there, but you didn't know how to change it, and you got used to it, and it became a habit, and that rusty zoom made that you couldn't even change it in the end. And of course you get this really, really weird perspective from nowhere, which was a good starting point for me. I saw this doesn't make sense. This is a good start. Start with logic. Thomas Nagel should be included in the list. It's a start, and then you move forward, and then you start realizing how you gain knowledge, how you sort of eat or imbibe the water more closer to the well from where it stems, not 50 kilometers from the point. Where it's been in the stream, it's been polluted, it's been diluted in ways you can't know about, and therefore you lose important information from where the knowledge stems. I will compare this to Das Man. Das Man is more on the scale of a locked focal setting, more on the perspective from nowhere, whereas Sorge, caring, is more on the other side. I prefer, in this case, a sliding scale. Goes from Sorge, goes to Das Man. Das Man being bodily, emotional, spiritual feeling of distance and being out of sync. And you have to look for extra proof. And this is very close to James J. Gibson. Should also be added. Because he discovered or revealed that this tendency being too on the Das Man side or conventional side, it leads to thinking when I move about for some mad reason, I don't have enough information. It's just crazy. Yes, of course, the static thing outside of me gets distorted when I move. Think about a train moving in 300 kilometers an hour. When you look outside, you will see the distortion. And you start thinking, they should be correct. There should be existences seen from a perspective. There you go again, from nowhere. The whole chair at one take. The back side, the front, the sides, everything about the chair, seen directly. And what do we have here? Well, we have a classical physical object, an existence in the old terms. And that made the whole of neurology think that our brain must recalculate what our senses tells us. And that implies that for some mad reason, human beings that don't stem from the earth. We come from some other place where we had to adjust ourselves, what we see, what we perceive. It is a little bit Parmenides all over. They sort of expect non-movement and only existence. Gibson said, wrong, wrong, wrong. When you move, that's even the thing you need to move about. Even if it's distorted in contrast to a make-believe world of transcendental objects you can see from all sides at one time, and you call them existences. what you will see is more movement, and I would say that is closer to the Pantarei of Heraclitus than my was. Yes, Kalle?
About the expression Pantarei, everything floats or everything moves. I understand the expression as more like a wish everything should move, because if everything doesn't move, it's like water that is still.
Yes.
That is like death. So, and today I read an essay by Roland Barthes. He commented on the verb être, that is to be in French, and it was about this slogan that the French had in the 50s, L'Algérie est française. That is, Algérie is French.
Very good, very
that
good.
is, it should be French.
Yes.
It was a wish.
Yeah.
So if you compare it to Pantarei, it says Heraclitus said that everything floats. It should float.
Mm-hmm.
That is Heraclitus. He said it should float.
Yeah.
Because in other case you have death.
Yeah, very good, very good.
So that is my take on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the New Age or the hippie movements, Pantarei, is more like, haven't you discovered it floats? It's like a slap over the face. Mm-hmm. Give up. Mm-hmm. It's always spoken in this half depressive manner. And it means that you should go to a hippie festival and get stoned. Mm-hmm. This is actually how Bet Yoga Yogson used it, as an excuse not going to work. So, yeah, very good. Pantarei could be said a wish, and if that wish is fulfilled, you get Pandanai. You are not with the things otherwise. Truth will, in this case, be something when you take both sides and understand that space and time is constructed that way. Be something that at the very same time is coming from within yourself as well as outside yourself. They are both needed without any one of them being attenuated, being less. It's not two sides of a coin. They strengthen each other. And the more contradictory they are led to be, the better it is. And the more, oddly enough, they will confirm each other. You see, stepping into this thinking in the wrong place could actually give you the illusion that they are the same. You see, trap? This trap is exactly that trap Heraclitus warned us about. That trap coming from the discoveries of the Ionian physikos. There is something growing that could lead mankind to trouble, and that is just because the inner and the outer will confirm each other, you could end like saying a bit like that. Which hand should I move first, or which foot should I move first? Should I say that external come first, or should I say the internal come first? That is the situation that is produced by the Ionian metaphysics. It is a possible situation, and Heraclitus used that to better show his philosophy. But it's also a trap. Once you start thinking the outside is the first one, you decide which is the hen and which is the egg. And now, when you do that, you're starting not to understand this. And the more you do that, the less you can understand it also. The more this is going to be like a riddle. Weird. It's going to be like a really weird thing you can just ignore. Yes, Kalle?
Do you remember who wrote about Möbius band? I read to you some. There was a.
One author is Stephen M. Rosen.
Yes, thank you.
He's the best one.
I was looking for him. Yes, absolutely.
And I think I just going to put in an example. I don't want to make this too chatty, but this is the last thing. I never realized while reading Stephen M. Rosen that he was hugely influenced by Heidegger. He doesn't mention it. And then I came to like, I got a slap on the face, but he was great. Because therefore I could put Stephen M. Rosen in a different compartment than Heidegger instead of making parallels. And by him being different from Heidegger or the interpreters of Heidegger, I had double force. I will get to that now here. This is similar. I would say in all these three examples, when going inside, when understanding the differences in the body as well in the mind, and understanding that a fixed focal setting will give the impression or the experience of the world being permanently out there. And I also mention the timing. You choose somewhere and you say the outside comes first. A sort of a trap, involuntarily, indirectly set up by the Ionian physikos. Those 3 or 4 things taken together you can sort of go closer to Zorge, or why not the situation, or you can go more in this direction, das Man, or 3-dimensional space, and where everything is seen from some strange outside. It's a gliding scale also of intention. The more you push it into the direction of the outside being first, and therefore more important, so to speak, where everything comes from. You see why the metaphor with 2 sides of a coin is disastrous if taken the wrong side. No pun intended. But you can see, while going away from das Man to the situation, you also gain intention, willingness. Where do you want to go with this? And this has to do with things like intention, being able to act, wanting, having a purpose, and doing the things that makes life meaningful. Like, I give some examples here, they are not recommendations. Like living morally, and not only for furthering yourself. Just an example, nothing to. But we have a problem in the West, and that's the idea, when you care, and this is exactly also the extended meaning of Sorge. When you care about others, you Sorge about everything. The message from the Klein bottle, also from Wittgenstein. You care more about everything. And that means caring about others means caring about yourself, and vice versa. You can't make a distinction. And what is this? This is, of course, Derrida, politics of friendship. The voice of the friend speaks about singularity without excluding plurality, and therefore can speak so much stronger, with such more emphasis, being able to get through. And usually in the West we get stranded with the idea, when I care about others, I don't care about myself. You must look out for number one. It's an American saying, take care of yourself first. In this model, it's no difference in some circumstances or some aspects. Caring about oneself and caring about others amount to the same thing. And the opposite, being egoistic, means not caring about others, not giving Sorge, and not caring about yourself. So morality gets affected here. And I would say most definitely when I studied philosophy, this taking away other things has gone so extreme, it was actually two different subjects. In one of the subjects was one professor, and in the other subject, what treated morality, was another professor, Torbjörn Tännsjö at that time, whose morality was said to be derived not from the inside, not from the wants, not from the subject, and therefore automatically had to be derived from the outside, from a sort of a reductionism. Even his term, the hedons, were an imitation of the atoms. And they were always of that kind, that one was one and two was two. So singularity excluded plurality and vice versa. This is of course an extreme, but that shows where we are going. Now I think when we remember the voice of the friend, o philoi, odes, philos. The voice does not exclude, it includes. We can take the voice away by making it not someone else's voice. By saying that's the voice of NN or XX. We remove from the voice when we do that. We make it something less. We make it more distant. And we make it out of time. And we also, when in the very exclusion process, both my hearing and the voice get diminished, attenuated. That voice will not speak clearly anymore. We will lose both distinction and generality. And I think this is an incredibly important thing, because this will lead to the modern world that we already talked about, where superficial things are more important and people care less about others because they see either myself or the other. Once that started, it's going to progress in a maelstrom that drags you down. It is impossible caring about others if you don't care about yourself. It is establishing a contradiction and saying, you derived what others are. I derived Kalle from what is not me. And that's making both less valuable, less to care about. And no wonder the world is going haywire and shouting at people, saying to them they should act more morally is just out to the point. Of course it will help their situation momentarily, but it's also has to do with knowledge. If you don't understand it, you won't do it. And for every time you won't help others, you will reaffirm and re-establish and make firmer the conviction that others are not of yourself and vice versa. By the action itself, and that action will become automatic in the end. You will enter the bus before the old lady in the end. And although you say to yourself it's immoral, you will do it anyway. Maybe it's not immoral in that way. Maybe the world is much more elegant, more encompassing, and, as Heraclitus would say, both of God but also of good. Because clinging to the good will make it disappear, will make it dependent on the evil. And saying that God is definable by what is not God, this would make everything completely horrible. That would exclude a part of reality from God, make God less. It is what is before. And this also had to do with inclusion and exclusion. you will be less able to include your body and mind if you define, for instance, thoughts as being small existences, a sort of objects that can be seen from every way and surrounded by empty space. Instead, see them as being together with the empty space that surrounds thoughts, and there you will enter into Danken and Denken. Something from Heidegger, that means that the all thinking used to be thankful, a gratitude, something of satiety, something that made you happy, that made you whole. And this will also enter the idea of attitude, coming from Iain McGilchrist, and that to a certain extent classical physics is a moral attitude. And I would say I completely agree. It inevitably, when you make the distinction inside outside to that sharp level, that early on level, it will make you a little in the way of Torbjörn Tännsjö. You will become more arrogant, you will not care, and that lack of caring that involves the person himself towards himself will show itself up in the directionality to the outside as well. And that is also modus or Stimmung. And it is a sort of Stimmung, even though if you don't realize it, it is a Stimmung to not be able to change the focal setting. So it is not 100% voluntarily, the attitude or the posture. It has moral aspects. But I wouldn't say you have always a choice. You need knowledge as well. And this is the reason why the Klein bottle is so important. This is also the reason why, even though quantum mechanics doesn't establish much, it takes away what classical physics tends to establish. This lure of the outsideness, and everyone who's describing a classical universe says that the world started from the outside, somewhere by a big bang, a single atom, or why not Richard Dawkins, the selfish gene. You see how that is repeated again and again and again, one single origin. This is starting on the wrong foot. This is starting to say that externality is where it all started, which is the position of Richard Dawkins, of course, and Daniel Dennett, and all physicists today, and biologists. This is a way of healing that problem, because they themselves get affected. Even if they would have wanted to continue with their ideologies and argument, this will actually strengthen them in their position, because now they are weak. They want to stand on only one leg, and I mean this in a literal sense. Look at Richard Dawkins. He's constantly standing on just one leg, and he's shifting his weight, and therefore he goes this way. It is noticeable. And I would say that's also the explanation for a person like Bertrand Russell, who changed philosophies 20 times. He was not an incomplete, he was not a crazy person, but in the very process of exclusion, therein lies also the reversal. Person that is very, very anti-something can all of a sudden change to the other position. It is not a stable position, because it doesn't take you into the picture. And how could it be stable if it doesn't take you into the picture? It cannot. Never has been, never will be. We are sort of going into a maelstrom that we only today can morally sort of condemn. And this is not what I'm saying. I would say this is not the message from Heraclitus. It's a moral stance, yes. I would say it has effects. Acting bad moral will have effects, because you go against yourself, you go against the world, you also go against God and the good. But it's not only that, it's also knowledge. And it's an understanding. Some people will never ever know this, not in their lifetime. Because thinking itself is contradictory. It has its outside, it has its inside. And I'm beginning to feel more and more that denken and danken are connected. I feel sometimes at good moments a clearness of mind and thinking, where the thoughts are like gold, because I allow the space around the thoughts to exist without excluding the thought. And I allow the thought to exist without excluding what surrounds it. And being stuck with a thought, like definitely Richard Dawkins, you can see that in his position. And he tries to exclude the opposition, what he would call the empty space around it, or his opponents when he goes to the debates. He excludes that. Thereby thinking he's going to make his own thoughts stronger. And in his mind, maybe at home, maybe in his sleep, he tries to take it away, push it away. He does not strengthen it. He doesn't strengthen his position in the debate. Allow the empty space, or the negation, or whatever you call it. Allow the person to come to you. And I think that was most clearly shown in that big group discussion, with the discovery that it was not one single discovery or one single origin of life on Earth. And Richard Dawkins, he just went, you could see how stiff he was. He hadn't even listened to what was said. The American, the multi-billionaire, I forgot his name now, I would put it in the description. Do you remember his name? No. The multi-millionaire had had a presentation of the discovery. And then Donald Davis, the British physicist, he comes into discussion, and he's more get together, he's more aware, and he most politely say, "Sir, do you really mean that there is not a single origin of the life on Earth?" And the American goes, "No, it's more like a bush." Bush. A bush has many starts, whereas a tree has only one start. And then Richard Dawkins wakes up. You can see how stiff he is. He tries to exclude other thoughts in his head, and thereby thinking is going to make his own thinking stronger. And thereby, listen now, thereby he's even losing perception. How could he miss that? It was a long presentation. And he's like, almost like he's dreaming or sleeping, and he's still happy because he thinks it's so ludicrous what he think has been said. He didn't realize it had been said and it had been proved. It has not been disapproved since. The proof is enormous. You will need $10 billion to make another proof. And it's a good guess that will prove the same thing, because finding out that life has several first origins, it's a finding is very hard to defy. But he was blocked bodily also, locked in hearing. He didn't listen to the voice. And I mean this in the most literal sense. You cannot actually hear. If you go too far in this direction, you will lose the ability to hear anything. Of course, somewhere here you still can hear enough to go to write books like Richard Dawkins and such. And here you can write even better books. He might change his mind here. He doesn't have to, voluntarily. But he might change his mind here. I think this is can give you some taste of what I mean here. I think it's time for a break here or finish.
Finish.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is a short summary of what I went through summer. There are more stuff yet to come, but this is the first take of it. I hope it was pedagogical, and I say, do have a very pleasant afternoon, and bye-bye for now.